Tantor Audio, a division of Recorded Books, presents The Newton Code, a mystery thriller, by Liam Fialkov, narrated by Jennifer Jill Araya. Chapter 1. Stop! Where are you heading? The message captured computer screens throughout the United States. The white, Gothic font and an ornament of some sort were contrasted against a dark background. However, no one took the time to admire the carefully styled letters as they were too busy absorbing their meaning. An unmistakable computer freeze. "Damn it," muttered a sweaty trader on the floor of the New York Stock Exchange as two of the computers he monitored while preparing for a transaction suddenly froze. When he raised his head, he saw that every one of the hundreds of screens around the room displayed the same message. In Chicago that same second, a lawyer was about to hit send on his carefully drafted response to a plea bargain proposal when his screen froze with the same annoying message. Throughout the country, frantic and annoyed users hurried to restart their computers and mobile devices, their lifeline connections to the world. While their devices restarted, users were prepared to dismiss the odd interruption and delve back into their demanding tasks. Unfortunately, after their machines were once again functional, they displayed the same frozen screen with the irritating message, "Stop! Where are you heading?" Frustrated users reached for their phones to call the computer guy or someone in the IT department who could help them get back to work. But tech support personnel, if they were reached, could not provide any rescue from the crisis. "We're checking," was the standard answer. "It looks like a virus." Some of them volunteered the obvious. All over the U.S., computers came to a standstill, rendering their owners helpless. The halt occurred exactly at 1:00 p.m. Eastern Time and affected all branches of the government as well as most of the private sector. It stalled traffic lights, which blinked yellow across the country, but didn't affect hospitals, airport control towers, and the rail transportation. And then, all at once, exactly 13 minutes after the start of the disturbance, everything went back to normal. What on earth was that? Was the question on everyone's mind. By evening, it was mostly forgotten, except for a mention on the evening news, where most channels hosted technology specialists. However, the experts had to admit that they were unable to locate the source of the mysterious freeze. They noted that, as far as computer security experts could tell, whatever it was left no trace in any code on any of the affected computers. Nor was there evidence of it having caused any damage to the data, programs, or operating systems. So the experts gave a general explanation about computer viruses and other malware. Hardly anybody paid attention to the ornament at the bottom right side of the screens. It displayed swirling carvings that decorated a golden wooden box. 2 wooden poles extended out of the box, one on each side as if to carry it, and sculptures of 2 winged seraphim were located on the hood. Among those who paid attention to the decoration, only a few recognized what it was: a distinctive image of the Ark of the Covenant. Chapter 2. Jerusalem, 1002 B.C. Young Yeruba'al didn't want to die. Not even 10 years old, he loved life. He loved strolling the trails around his village, investigating the world as it woke up to a cool morning. He loved listening to the birds nesting in the oak, cedar, and olive trees. He loved sneaking at night, hiding in the darkness and secretly eavesdropping on the grown-ups as they chattered around the campfire. He listened as they discussed important matters and told stories of the ancient past. The child knew his tribal elders well enough to detect when their accounts slipped into exaggeration as they glorified victories in wars with their neighbors. Although young, he already knew who his favorite girl was. Charming Bat Ashtoreth, with the long black hair, shiny and curly, and the large, cheerful brown eyes. Her graceful, agile movements reminded him of an antelope. More than anything, he loved listening to the chime of her laughter, and he knew that he wanted to wake up next to her in his adult life. With his little brother, Ben Reshef, he wandered around pathways, happily climbing large rocks and jumping from one rock to another. In several selected rocks, the tribesmen had carved large pits for winemaking, and during the grape harvest, they piled grapes in the pits, then pressed the grapes with their bare feet. The first time Yeruba'al had tried to drink wine, it had immediately made him dizzy and given him a terrible tummy ache. He'd sworn he'd never drink wine again. There was one massive rock that they didn't carve or use for making wine. He was told that the rock, located on a threshing floor owned by a man named Aravna, was sacred. Children were not allowed to play there. Every once in a while, Yeruba'al was present at ceremonies where he saw the tribal high priest slaughter animals, mostly lambs and partridges, on the big rock which they called the drinking stone. It was a sacrifice to the gods, so he was told, and he wondered why they had to kill innocent animals in order to please the gods. Yeruba'al heard whispers alluding that in the distant past, his people used to sacrifice people as well, especially boys. Apprehensively, he asked his father if it was true, but his father asserted that for many years the Jebusites contented themselves and their gods with animal sacrifices. However, the Jebusites now faced a formidable enemy that threatened their survival. Young Yeruba'al knew that his tribe had fallen onto extremely hard times, but he never imagined that, of all people in his tribe, he would be required to pay the ultimate price. One night, when most of the tribe lay sleeping, Yeruba'al snuck by the campfire, where he saw his father sitting around the last crackling fire with their neighbor, Baal Shalem. Ducking behind a nearby cluster of trees, Yeruba'al listened to their hushed conversation.
"Hebron has fallen,"
Baal Shalem said.
"Their fortifications couldn't withstand the Hebrews' attack. The same is true for our allies at Lachish,"
Yeruba'al's father said.
"I'm afraid the Hebrews are gaining control over the entire land of Canaan. I am concerned for the future of our kingdom,"
Baal Shalem confessed, shaking his head as he stared into the clay mug in his hands. To Yeruba'al's surprise and horror, his father nodded and said gravely,
"It will not be long before King David sets his sights upon Jebus."
A few nights later, Yeruba'al eavesdropped on his parents' conversation. "I'm afraid," his mother whispered, clutching her elbows. "So afraid I can't fall asleep at night." She sat on a sheep's wool blanket in their small brick home and bowed over her knees. Letting her hair slip over her shoulder, she hid her face from the dancing light of the hearth fire.
"You need not worry, Bat-Shahar,"
his father said, leaning forward to brush her dark hair out of her eyes.
"You know that our town is well fortified. It is located up on the mountain, which is why no one could conquer it in the past when other kingdoms fell one after the other."
"But now it's different," his mother said. "I've heard from Bat Ashra, who heard from her husband, who is close to the high priest, that of all places it is here that King David wants to establish his capital."
"Which is why we must pray and call upon our gods,"
his father replied.
"We must offer sacrifices and hope that the gods, Baal and Ashtoreth, will support and protect us."
Indeed, on the following days, Yeruba'al saw that the high priest and his clergy increased the rate of animal sacrifice, which soon became a daily occurrence. Chapter 3. The phone rang. Michael glanced at his phone, on the table in front of him, and was surprised to see the name Stuart McPherson flashing across the screen.
"Stuart?"
He didn't hide his surprise.
"That's me,"
said the veteran journalist in his familiar, gravelly voice and somber tone, just like it had been 5 years earlier when they'd worked together.
"How's life in the world of academia?"
"It pays the bills." Michael shrugged his shoulders.
"And it's comfortable. But not too exciting, is it?"
McPherson probed.
"True."
Michael fiddled with his pen. He sensed this was more than a social call.
"So, what are your plans for the upcoming summer?"
Michael hesitated for a brief moment.
"You want me to go somewhere undercover?"
Michael wasn't sure why he felt that his spine tingled.
"It's possible,"
McPherson answered in a tone much grimmer than his usual somber manner.
"Stuart,"
Michael said slowly, keeping his breathing controlled,
"I thought I made it clear that I'm not spy material. You also made it clear that you're a person of high integrity and someone I can count on." "What is it this time?"
Michael said with a hefty sigh.
"What conspiracy are you trying to unearth?" "I can't discuss it over the phone,"
McPherson said.
"This time the stakes could be much higher."
"Higher?" Michael asked, eyebrows rising.
"Higher than spying on my employer? Well, don't forget that you also got a great deal of satisfaction from being part of that assignment,"
the journalist reminded him.
"Clearly you're right,"
Michael admitted. He remembered how he got to play music in a rock band as part of that assignment. The same band of which he was still a member, and with whom he played most weekends. He also met Melanie, his wife, while on assignment for McPherson.
"Is it something to do with the media world?" "Probably not,"
McPherson replied in a grave tone of voice.
"This time I need you to help me prevent a global war."
Chapter 4.
"Long time no see."
McPherson smiled. He shook Michael's hand warmly and tapped him on the shoulder with a broad hand. About 1 week after McPherson's call, the two met at a cafe in Manhattan, not far from the university where Michael taught. Michael visited the place regularly. He thought it had a homey atmosphere, with its friendly staff, and wood-paneled walls decorated with landscape art of the French painter Paul Gauguin.
"Good to see you, Stuart,"
Michael replied. Has it really been that long? Michael wondered, as he noticed the changes in his friend's face. McPherson's hair was now completely gray. The wrinkles in his face had deepened, and his skin color was pale. He must be around 60, Michael thought to himself as he noted that McPherson's handshake was as firm as before, and he had the same penetrating yet kind eyes. Michael regarded McPherson as a courageous fighter against corruption, worthy of being a role model. After their phone call, Michael reflected on his previous collaboration with his esteemed colleague, about 5 years earlier. He realized that while he performed his tasks somewhat reluctantly, there were aspects of undercover work that he liked. Maybe it was the thrill of danger, or perhaps the idea of working on something grand and being chosen for the job by the renowned journalist. Now, though his initial response was that of hesitancy, he realized that he actually looked forward to some action that would pull him out of his routine, comfortable life. Michael liked his life. He did. He was blessed to have found Melanie, his true love. Blessed for the life they had built together, and for their daughter, Linda. Blessed to have found a career he was passionate about, teaching investigative journalism. Michael was grateful to have found his biological mom after years of yearning, and he didn't forget McPherson's help in tracking her. He treasured his friends and the rock and roll band in which he played lead guitar on weekends. But every now and then, something about his comfortable lifestyle felt off, wrong somehow, or incomplete. Like there was a hole in his life, but he didn't know how to fill it. So he'd recognized that McPherson's call had perhaps come at an opportune time, and he'd eagerly awaited their meeting. "You sounded mysterious," Michael said. They sat at a corner table at a late morning hour. Apart from the elderly couple sitting at a table by the window and the occasional customer grabbing a coffee to go, the spacious cafe was empty. "Do you remember our last collaboration?" McPherson asked. "How can I forget?" Michael replied. "Sometimes I wonder where I would be if you hadn't recruited me for that spying mission." The waitress came by, and McPherson ordered an espresso and a croissant. "I'll have what he's having," Michael said. The waitress wrote their order and clicked away on her heels. "You probably remember," McPherson said, "that I didn't ask you to approach anyone directly, but devised a way by which you would attract Lindsay's attention so that he would be the one to approach you." "I remember." Michael concealed his smile. "I had to play the guitar. I think that's why I accepted the assignment." "I'm asking you to proceed in a similar manner," McPherson said. "You want me to play the guitar?" "Well, not this time. But first—" McPherson cleared his throat. "I want to be clear that I'm reaching out to you because it's something that I couldn't do on my own. I'm too recognizable." Michael let out a fond chuckle in response to McPherson's allusion to his fame, as footsteps approached. The clicking of heels on wood was soon followed by their waitress, who set their order on the low table in front of them before clip-clopping away. "What do you want me to do?" Michael asked, meeting McPherson's eyes. "I want you to go online," McPherson said, sipping his coffee with a knowing gleam in his eyes, as if he knew every doubtful thought trekking across Michael's mind. "Online?" Though Michael tried, he couldn't see the barest hint of amusement on McPherson's face. "Not just online, but to specific websites. I'll give you the URLs, where certain people meet and exchange information. Try to sound interested in their theories, learn all you can about their agenda, and wait until they approach you." "Who are these certain people?" Michael asked, taking a bite of his croissant. "A group that admires Sir Isaac Newton." "Newton?" Michael's eyes widened. "The 17th century scientist?" "Yes," McPherson said, and fixed him with a stern glare. "From now on, we have to be utterly discreet about this mission." "Fine," Michael said, realizing that he was talking somewhat loudly. "What do you know about Sir Isaac Newton?" McPherson asked, and nibbled on his croissant. "Not a whole lot," Michael admitted. "I know that he was one of the greatest scientists of all time. He pioneered the field of calculus, and of course he is known for developing the theory of gravity." "And much more," McPherson said.
He also laid the foundations for classical mechanics, as well as established the field of optics. He was instrumental in founding the laws of motion, and he calculated the tides, the trajectories of comets, the speed of sound, and much, much more.
Quite a capable guy, Michael nodded.
Even with all of his recognized achievements, McPherson continued, there's a lot about Newton that's not widely known by, and perhaps even hidden from, the general public.
Like what? Michael slid his chair closer to the table and leaned forward.
Newton dedicated much of his time and energy to alchemy, metaphysics, and unorthodox biblical theories.
Sounds a bit strange. Michael's eyebrows furrowed as he considered the new information.
I wasn't aware of that. I have a list of online resources for you to study and a group you should try to mingle with. You'll have to convince them that you're genuine. Don't be surprised if they're suspicious toward you, at least in the beginning. Now, the important part, which, at the moment, is the focus of this unofficial investigation.
McPherson examined Michael with a piercing look.
You need to learn Newton's theories regarding the first Jewish temple in Jerusalem.
The first Jewish temple?
There were 2 temples built on the exact same spot in Jerusalem. Both were destroyed,
McPherson said.
The first one is also known as the Temple of Solomon, since it was built by King Solomon. There is plenty of information about it in the Old Testament as well as on the internet.
So this is a Jewish group? Michael wondered.
Not at all,
McPherson replied.
They are devout Christians.
It sounds interesting. Michael scratches his head. But also odd. I mean, I had no idea that Newton wrote anything about the ancient temple.
He wrote a lot,
McPherson said.
He studied the temple compulsively, and these writings don't always appear where you'd expect to find them.
McPherson pulled a small notebook and a pen out of his pocket and scribbled something onto a page. He tore out the paper, folded it, and handed it over to Michael, who smiled at the ritualistic gesture. Michael unfolded the paper, curious at what it was that McPherson clearly attempted to emphasize. It was just a number. 2,520.
Find out what you can about this number,
McPherson said in a somber tone of voice.
I'll do my best,
Michael promised.
And by the way, is Irene helping you with your project? She's a computer genius, right?
Michael was one of the selected few who'd been invited to McPherson's small and modest wedding to Irene, his second wife.
She sure is,
McPherson confirmed, his smile softening at the question.
Irene's on a sabbatical, so she's helping me on some projects, because, as you know, my computer skills are somewhat limited.
I'm due for a sabbatical in the upcoming school year, Michael said as he finished his coffee. I'm looking forward to having some time for myself.
I'm sensing you might need a break from teaching.
McPherson smirked. You're right. I've been questioning many things lately. As they stood and prepared to leave, McPherson had one last thing to emphasize.
Be extremely cautious. These people are religious fanatics who are willing to bring on a world war. You must not trigger their suspicion.
Chapter 5. Hi, honey. Melanie, dressed in her nightgown, shuffled into his home office. She rubbed her eyes, yawning. Is everything all right? Michael glanced at the clock on the wall and saw that it was past 3:00 a.m. I noticed that you've been going to bed very late. She stated the obvious. You also seem quite preoccupied recently. What's going on?" He turned away from the computer and looked at her. Even in the minimal light in the small room, he couldn't help but adore her beauty. For a moment, he recalled how he'd been drawn to her when they first met. There was something about her that he'd never felt with any girl he'd met before. A sweetness that made him want to kiss her right there and then. That hasn't changed over the years, he now realized. Unwilling to breach her father's trust in him, he hadn't approached her for several months. Eventually, it was Melanie who'd made the first move when she'd asked him out.
"It is strange, Lainey," he said pensively. "But there is one thing that I don't know if we've ever discussed. At least, not in a profound way."
"What is that?"
She sank into the armchair in front of him and waited. "God."
"God?" Her eyes widened a touch.
"Yes," he said. "I'm studying the issue."
He smiled, knowing his words deserved an explanation. She observed him, his athletic body erect in his simple computer chair with his wavy black hair over his forehead. His eyes glowed in the dim room. She briefly recalled the first time she'd seen Michael, and how she thought that he'd been sculpted like a statue of a Greek god. That hasn't changed much, she thought to herself. She wondered about the unexpected topic. "I thought we were atheists." Michael contemplated her words. "Well, I know I am an atheist," she added.
"But perhaps we should give the matter another thought," he said. "As far as I know, some of the world's greatest thinkers considered themselves believers, like Einstein and Newton."
"Especially Newton," she asserted. He was surprised.
"Why especially Newton?"
"I once read," she said, "that in addition to science, he held a deep interest in the Christian scriptures."
"The Christian and the Jewish scriptures," Michael corrected.
"But why now?" she asked. "What's triggered your sudden interest in God?"
"Stuart McPherson."
"McPherson?" she echoed in surprise. "I haven't heard from him in ages. Is he still in town?"
"I met him in a downtown cafe," Michael said. "He keeps his old office in Manhattan."
"Well, we haven't moved much either."
"We will," he said.
He knew Melanie wanted to leave Brooklyn and buy a home in the country. He liked the idea too, but delayed the move, dreading a long daily commute.
"I'll tell you what's going on, but it must remain a secret. Please don't discuss this with anybody."
"Okay." Michael knew for certain that he could trust her word.
"Stuart approached me a couple of weeks ago and asked me to join him in an investigation. Apparently, there's a cult, a very sophisticated, well-organized, and well-funded group that McPherson suspects is planning something very sinister."
"How sinister?"
"They may be striving to bring on a world war."
"A world war? Why? Between whom?"
"Probably Christians against Muslims. They want to create the conditions for the second coming of Jesus Christ."
"Oh my God," she exclaimed. Then yawned. "Hun, this is all very fascinating and scary, but I have to be in court early in the morning. Let's continue tomorrow."
"I'll be here,"
Michael promised. She got up and embraced him. As she aimed for the door, she glanced at his computer screen. "What's that, hun?" She pointed to the computer.
"It's Hebrew script,"
he said.
Well, actually, it's not even Hebrew but Aramaic, an ancient language which nobody speaks anymore.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?